Welcome back to another story on Infidelity Tales Lab. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1, Perfect Landing. Samuel Hurd had logged 12,000 flight hours over 15 years, 8 of those with the military and 7 with Continental Apex Airlines. At 38, he was the kind of pilot other pilots respected, methodical, unshakable, with an instinct for reading weather patterns that bordered on supernatural. His crew called him Ice because nothing rattled him. Not thunderstorms over the Rockies. Not hydraulic failures at 30,000 feet. Not even the pressure of carrying 186 souls through the sky. He'd grown up in rural Montana, the son of a mechanic who taught him that machines made sense when people didn't. After his mother died when he was 12, Samuel found solace in understanding how things worked. Engines, circuits, aerodynamics. The Air Force had refined that obsession into precision. He'd flown combat missions in Syria, brought damaged birds home on prayers and skill, earned a chest full of commendations he never talked about. His wife, April Manning Hurd, had been a flight attendant when they met 6 years ago. She had auburn hair that caught sunlight like copper wire and a smile that seemed genuine until you looked closer. She'd quit flying 2 years into their marriage, said she wanted stability, wanted to start a family. Samuel had agreed, taken extra routes to compensate for her lost income. They'd bought a house in suburban Denver with a white picket fence that April insisted on. Lately, though, she'd been distant, working late at her new job as an event coordinator, taking calls in another room. Samuel had pushed the worry aside. Pilots learned to compartmentalize, to focus on what they could control. Flight 4247 from Los Angeles to Denver was routine. Clear skies, light winds, a Tuesday evening red-eye with a full passenger manifest. Samuel had done his walk-around inspection with his usual thoroughness, checked every rivet and seal. His co-pilot, Charlie Harper, was a capable 29-year-old with sharp reflexes and a tendency to talk too much about his fantasy football league. Betting big on the Broncos this season, Charlie said as they completed their pre-flight checklist. Stick to flying, Samuel replied, but there was warmth in his voice. The flight attendants, led by Senior Attendant Teresa Goodman, a veteran with 30 years of service, had boarded the passengers efficiently. Samuel had watched them on the security monitors, seen the stream of business travelers, families, and college kids filling the cabin. Full flight. Good revenue for the airline. Takeoff was smooth. They reached cruising altitude of 36,000 feet 12 minutes ahead of schedule. Samuel had switched to autopilot, monitored instruments, made small talk with Charlie about the upcoming holidays. Everything was textbook. Then, somewhere over Nevada, Samuel felt it. A subtle change in cabin pressure, barely perceptible. The instruments showed normal, but his instincts screamed otherwise. He'd learned in combat to trust those instincts. Charlie, you feel that? Charlie checked his panels. Everything's green, Cap. Samuel frowned, ran diagnostics. All systems nominal. Maybe he was tired. He'd been pulling double shifts, trying to save for the renovations April wanted. The rest of the flight was smooth. They began their descent into Denver at 10:47 p.m., 17 minutes early. Samuel guided the Boeing 737 down through the night sky with the practiced ease of 1,000 landings. Touchdown was buttersoft, barely a bump. Charlie grinned. Textbook, Cap. They taxied to gate C-17, completed shutdown procedures. Samuel felt oddly uneasy, but couldn't pinpoint why. As he gathered his flight bag and prepared for the standard post-flight routine, he noticed something strange, no noise from the cabin. Usually, you heard passengers immediately after landing. Phone calls, chatter, overhead bins opening. But there was only silence. Cabin's quiet tonight, Charlie observed. Samuel keyed the intercom to the cabin. Teresa, we're at the gate. How's passenger deplaning? Static. He tried again. Nothing. Check the cabin, Samuel said, his military training kicking in. Something was wrong. He opened the cockpit door and stepped into the galley. The forward cabin lights were on, illuminating rows of seats in harsh fluorescent glow. Empty seats. All of them. But the seat belts were still buckled, hanging limply across empty cushions. Personal items remained. A paperback on seat 12C, headphones on 7A, a child's stuffed rabbit on 23F. Carry-on luggage sat in overhead bins, some still open. Coffee cups rested in armrests, liquid still warm. Samuel walked down the aisle, his heartbeat accelerating but his face remaining calm. Years of training kept his breathing steady even as his mind raced. Charlie followed, his face pale. What the hell, Cap? 186 passengers. Samuel had seen them board. He'd heard them during the safety demonstration. He'd felt the weight of them in the aircraft's handling. Now they were gone. Chapter 2. Gaslight. The first airport security officer arrived within 3 minutes of Samuel's emergency call. Then another. Then 5 more. Within 20 minutes, Gate C-17 was swarming with police, FBI, TSA, and airline executives in expensive suits trying to control a situation that made no sense. Samuel stood in the terminal, watching them process the aircraft like a crime scene. He'd given his statement 4 times already, each time to someone more senior. Each time, he saw the same flicker in their eyes: doubt, suspicion, the careful assessment of whether he was lying or insane. Captain Hurd, walk me through it again. This was Agent Mark Nash from the FBI's Denver field office, a man with steel gray hair and eyes that had seen too much to be shocked by anything. Samuel liked him immediately. He listened without interrupting, took notes without judgment. Samuel repeated the story. The routine flight. The subtle pressure change he couldn't confirm. The silent cabin. The buckled seatbelts. The passengers boarded in Los Angeles? Nash asked. I watched them on monitors. Full manifest. 186 passengers, standard crew of 6. And your crew? That was the other impossible thing. The 4 flight attendants, including Teresa Goodman, were also gone. Only Samuel and Charlie remained. Charlie was with you the entire flight. 99%. He used the cockpit lavatory twice, maybe 5 minutes total. Nash made a note. Any unusual communications during flight? Nothing. Standard check-ins with traffic control. They went through the manifest together. Real people with real names, real ticket purchases, real boarding passes scanned in Los Angeles 3 hours ago. The airline was already contacting families, causing confusion and panic. Charlie was being questioned separately. Samuel caught glimpses of him through the terminal windows, looking shell-shocked and young. Around 2 a.m., Samuel was finally allowed to leave. Nash gave him a card. Don't leave Denver. We'll need more statements. Samuel drove home through empty streets, his mind working the problem like a mechanical failure. What could explain it? Mass hallucination? Impossible. Charlie saw them too. So did ground crew in LA. Elaborate hoax? To what end? Secret emergency evacuation during flight? But they'd been at cruising altitude. He pulled into his driveway at 3:14 a.m. April's car was there, lights off in the house. He sat in his truck for a moment, trying to process the impossible. His phone buzzed constantly, news alerts, messages from other pilots, reporters who'd already gotten his number. Inside, April was awake, sitting at the kitchen table in her bathrobe. Her face was carefully neutral. Samuel, I saw the news. He explained what happened. She listened, nodding in the right places, but something felt off. Her reaction seemed rehearsed, like she'd practiced what to say. That's terrifying, she said, but her eyes didn't match her words. You must be exhausted. I need to figure out what happened. Maybe you should rest first. You've been working so hard lately, and stress can. I'm not imagining this, April. I didn't say you were. She stood, touched his arm. But maybe there's an explanation you're not seeing yet. The airline will investigate. Samuel looked at his wife of 6 years and felt something cold settle in his chest. She was humoring him, like you'd humor someone who'd lost their grip on reality. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Watch the news. You're about to become famous for all the wrong reasons. He turned on the television. CNN was already running the story. Pilot reports 186 passengers vanished mid-flight. Airline questions captain's mental state. The news anchor continued. Continental Apex Airlines released a statement an hour ago expressing concern for Captain Samuel Hurd's well-being and announcing he's been placed on immediate administrative leave pending psychological evaluation. Samuel felt April watching him, her face a mask of concern that didn't reach her eyes. This wasn't an accident. This was a setup. Chapter 3. The Revelation. The airline called an emergency press conference 1 week after Flight 4247. Samuel had been suspended, his pilot's license temporarily revoked pending investigation. He'd spent 7 days being poked and prodded by airline-appointed psychiatrists who asked the same questions in different ways, always circling back to whether he'd been under stress, whether his marriage was stable, whether he had a history of mental illness. His phone had been confiscated as evidence. His home had been searched. April had been sympathetic in public, distraught for the cameras. But at home, she'd moved into the guest bedroom, claiming she needed space to process everything. Samuel had used the week productively. Without his phone, he'd bought a burner. Without access to airline records, he'd called in favors from military buddies. Charlie had been suspended too, but was cooperating fully with investigators, which apparently meant distancing himself from Samuel's version of events. Now Samuel sat in his lawyer's office, watching Continental Apex's CEO, Reginald Harrison, take the podium. Harrison was 55, silver-haired, with the kind of practiced charisma that played well on television. He'd risen through the airline ranks fast, too fast, some said, and had a reputation for ruthless cost-cutting and PR spin. "Thank you for coming," Harrison began, his voice grave. "This has been a difficult week for Continental Apex Airlines, and we want to be transparent with the public about our findings." Samuel's lawyer, a sharp woman named Dolores Richard, leaned forward. "Here it comes. Our investigation, in cooperation with federal authorities, has uncovered several troubling facts about Flight 4247. Harrison paused for effect. First, the passenger manifest Captain Hurd claims showed 186 passengers was, in fact, a test manifest created for a training simulation 3 months ago. That simulation file was somehow loaded into the active flight system. Samuel's blood went cold. Second, Harrison continued, Flight 4247 was scheduled as a cargo-only flight. No passengers were ever booked. No boarding passes were scanned in Los Angeles. The security footage Captain Hurd claims it shows passengers boarding actually shows routine cargo loading. "That's a lie," Samuel said flatly. On screen, Harrison's expression turned sympathetic. "We've also learned that Captain Hurd has been experiencing significant personal and financial stress. His wife has provided testimony about concerning behavior, paranoia, insomnia, obsessive checking, and rechecking of instruments. We believe Captain Hurd experienced a severe psychotic episode, possibly related to undiagnosed PTSD from his military service." The screen split to show April, filmed earlier, her eyes red from crying. "I love my husband, but he hasn't been himself lately. He's been talking about feeling watched, followed. He barely sleeps. I think the pressure finally broke him." Samuel watched his wife lie beautifully for the cameras, and something clicked into place. The distance. The late nights. The rehearsed reactions. "She's in on it," he said quietly. Dolores looked at him. "Samuel, my wife is working with them. With Harrison." He pointed at the screen, where Harrison was explaining that Samuel would receive all the help he needs, and that Continental Apex stood by their pilots during mental health crises. "That's a serious accusation," Dolores warned. "Play it back. Watch her eyes. She's reading from a script." Samuel stood, paced. "They've been planning this. The distance, the late nights, the pushing me to work more routes. They wanted me exhausted, stressed, easier to discredit. But why? I don't know yet. But I'm going to find out." The press conference continued. Harrison announced new mental health screening protocols for pilots. He expressed sympathy for Samuel's family. He assured the public that their safety was Continental Apex's top priority. Then he dropped the final bomb. "We've also discovered evidence that Captain Hurd may have been experiencing blackouts. Security footage shows him in the aircraft hangar on 3 separate occasions he has no memory of, accessing aircraft he wasn't scheduled to fly. We're investigating whether he may have been involved in unauthorized cargo transport." Samuel's hands clenched. They were setting him up not just as crazy, but as criminal. "They're framing you," Dolores said, understanding dawning. "Question is, for what?" Samuel thought about the subtle pressure change during the flight, the silence when there should have been noise, the buckled seatbelts, the warm coffee cups. Something had happened on that flight. Passengers had been there. He'd trust his instincts over a fabricated manifest any day, which meant they'd been evacuated somewhere between LA and Denver. But where? And how? And why manufacture an elaborate cover-up? His burner phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "They killed Teresa Goodman 3 days ago. Made it look like suicide. You're next if you don't stop digging." Or you could meet me at Hangar 7, midnight, if you want the truth. Samuel showed Dolores the text. That could be a trap, she said. Probably is. Samuel grabbed his jacket. But whoever sent this knows Teresa's dead before it's been reported. That means they're inside the operation. Samuel, if you're right about this being a conspiracy, then I'm already dead if I do nothing. April testified against me. The airlines turned me into a villain. My crew is missing or dead. I have one play left. What's that? Samuel smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a combat pilot who'd learned to navigate through hostile territory with nothing but skill and determination. I stop playing defense. I find out what they're hiding, and then I burn their whole operation down. Chapter 4, The Informant. Hangar 7 sat on the southern edge of Denver International Airport, in a cluster of maintenance facilities that serviced private charter flights. Samuel had cased it for 4 hours before the midnight meeting, watching patterns, identifying security cameras, noting exit routes. Old habits from military intelligence training. Always have an escape plan. He arrived at 11:47 p.m., parked a quarter-mile away, and approached on foot through the service roads. The hangar's side door was unlocked, exactly as the text had promised. Inside, a single overhead light illuminated a Cessna Citation under maintenance, casting long shadows across the concrete floor. Captain Hurd. The voice came from behind the aircraft. Samuel's hand went to the taser he'd bought that afternoon. Not a gun, couldn't risk additional charges, but he stayed calm. A woman emerged. Mid-40s, dark hair pulled back, wearing maintenance coveralls. It took Samuel a moment to place her. Penny Cunningham, a flight operations coordinator he'd seen around Continental Apex headquarters, but never really talked to. You sent the text, Samuel said. Teresa Goodman was my best friend for 20 years. Penny's voice was tight with grief and anger. They murdered her because she was going to talk. About what? About what really happened on Flight 4247. About what Reginald Harrison's been doing with Continental Apex jets for the past 8 months. Samuel stepped closer. Start from the beginning. Penny pulled out a tablet, brought up files. Harrison's been running a side operation, using scheduled flights for human trafficking. Passengers who match certain profiles, no family, traveling alone, cash tickets, they get diverted. Diverted where? There's a private airstrip near Pueblo, about an hour south. The flights make an unexpected stop. Pilots are told it's a maintenance issue or weather diversion. Passengers are told to deplane temporarily. Then they're separated, sedated, taken to various locations. The aircraft continues to its original destination empty. Samuel felt sick. And the pilots? Most are kept in the dark. Harrison controls flight operations, so he assigns specific pilots to specific routes. But you, Penny met his eyes. You notice things. You're too good, too observant. Teresa told me you'd been asking questions about irregular fuel consumption, unscheduled stops that didn't match logs. You were getting close to something you weren't supposed to see. So Harrison decided to discredit me first. Worse, he decided to use you as the patsy for the whole operation. If it ever gets exposed, you're the crazy pilot who was running it. He's already planted evidence. Those security footage clips of you in hangars? Fabricated timestamps from legitimate visits, altered to look suspicious. And my wife. Penny's expression hardened. April Manning and Reginald Harrison have been sleeping together for 8 months. She fed him information about you, your schedule, your mental state, when you'd be most vulnerable. In exchange, Harrison promised her money and a position in his new venture once you were out of the picture. Samuel had suspected, but hearing it confirmed still felt like a punch to the gut. 6 years of marriage, built on lies. How'd they pull off Flight 4247? He asked, pushing personal feelings aside. I saw passengers board. You saw edited security footage on your monitors. The real feed showed cargo loading, but Harrison had tech people splice in old footage of a different flight boarding. The passengers you flew with were real. They were the latest batch for trafficking. That's why it was so important. It wasn't just discrediting you. It was making their biggest transport disappear from official records entirely. Where are they now? I don't know all the locations. Teresa was gathering intel. She had access to crew schedules, noticed patterns. That's why they killed her. Made it look like she hung herself out of guilt over your mental breakdown. Samuel processed this. Why are you helping me? Because Teresa was the best person I knew, and they murdered her. Because this is evil, and I can't live with knowing and doing nothing. Penny's voice cracked. And because they're planning to kill you within the next 48 hours. I overheard Harrison talking to someone. Said you're too much of a liability now, even discredited. Who's his partner in this? I don't know. Teresa thought it was someone in law enforcement, someone who could cover things up, manipulate evidence. The operation's too smooth to not have inside help. Samuel thought about Agent Mark Nash, who'd seemed too understanding, too interested in specific details. FBI? Maybe. Or TSA, local police. Whoever it is, they've got reach. Samuel looked at the files on Penny's tablet. Passenger names, dates, flight numbers. Evidence that could bring down Harrison, if they could prove it. Will you testify? If you can keep me alive long enough. Penny handed him a flash drive. Everything's on here. But Samuel, you need to understand. Harrison's connected to some serious people. Trafficking this organized, this protected? There's money behind it. Power. If you go after him, you're going after an entire network. Good. Samuel pocketed the drive. I learned a long time ago that the bigger they are, the more noise they make when they fall. What's your play? Samuel smiled, his mind already working through possibilities. Harrison thinks I'm broken, desperate, easy to eliminate. That's his mistake. He confused being a target with being a victim. There's something else, Penny said. Your co-pilot, Charlie Harper. He's been cooperative with the investigation because Harrison offered him your position. Charlie thinks you actually had a breakdown. That stung, but Samuel kept his face neutral. Anyone else I should know about? Joe Fleming, Harrison's head of security. Former CIA, loves hurting people. He's the one who'll come for you. And there's someone else Harrison meets with monthly. I don't have a name, but Teresa said they run the financial side. How do I find them? Harrison's having a meeting tomorrow night at a warehouse in Commerce City. I have the address. He thinks you'll be dead by then, so security will be lighter. Samuel considered the risks. Walking into a warehouse full of human traffickers wasn't smart. But sometimes the direct approach was the only approach. I'll need weapons. Can't help you there. But I know someone who might. She pulled out a piece of paper with an address in Aurora. Simon Pineda. He was a maintenance chief who got fired 6 months ago for asking too many questions about aircraft modifications. He's bitter, broke, and knows where a lot of bodies are buried, figuratively and maybe literally. Samuel memorized the address. Thank you for this. Don't thank me. Just stop them. And Samuel. Penny's eyes were hard. Whatever you do to Harrison and April, make it hurt. Chapter 5. The Arsenal. Simon Pineda lived in a rundown apartment complex in Aurora, the kind of place where nobody asked questions and nobody remembered faces. Samuel knocked at 7 a.m. After spending the rest of the night going through Penny's files, cross-referencing passenger names with missing persons reports. The pattern was clear. Harrison targeted the vulnerable. Immigrants without documentation, runaways, people society wouldn't miss. The scope of it turned Samuel's stomach. Over 8 months, Continental Apex flights had been used to disappear at least 300 people. The door opened on a chain. A man with tattoo-sleeved arms and suspicious eyes peered out. Yeah. Simon Pineda? My name's Samuel Hurd. I know who you are. Crazy pilot from the news. But there was a smile in Simon's voice. Except you're not crazy, are you? The chain came off. Simon was 52, stocky, with grease under his fingernails and the look of a man who'd seen the worst of people. His apartment was small but meticulously organized, with airplane schematics covering one wall. Penny said you might come by, Simon said, gesturing to a couch. Coffee, please. Over terrible instant coffee, Simon told his story. He'd worked for Continental Apex for 23 years, rising to head of maintenance for the Western region. 6 months ago, he'd noticed unauthorized modifications to several aircraft, hidden cargo holds, sealed passenger compartments, ventilation systems that could pump sedatives into cabins. When I reported it, Harrison had me fired for fabricating evidence. Tried to claim I was stealing parts. Simon's jaw tightened. They blackballed me from every airline. I've been living on savings and bitterness ever since. You documented the modifications? Every single one. Photos, work orders, even recorded conversations. Simon pulled out a laptop, showed Samuel detailed evidence of aircraft being retrofitted for human transport. I knew something dirty was happening. Didn't know what until I saw your story on the news. Why didn't you go to the authorities? Who? The FBI agent working the case is Nash, right? He interviewed me 3 months ago about the modifications, took all my evidence, and nothing happened. Either he's incompetent or he's in on it. Samuel filed that away. Penny said you might have resources I need. Simon grinned, and it wasn't a friendly expression. You planning to go to war with Harrison? Something like that. Good. I've been waiting for someone angry enough and smart enough to actually do something. Simon stood, led Samuel to a bedroom that had been converted into a workshop. I've spent 6 months preparing for this. The room contained a workbench covered in electronics, several locked gun cases, and detailed maps of Continental Apex facilities. I've got weapons, legally purchased, all registered, Simon said, opening a case to reveal handguns and tactical gear. I've got surveillance equipment, hacking tools from my nephew who's less legal than I am, and I've mapped every security protocol Continental Apex uses. Samuel examined a Glock 19, checked the weight and balance. Why help me? Because Harrison destroyed my life, and I want to watch him burn. Because what he's doing is evil. And because I'm old enough to not care about consequences anymore. Simon met Samuel's eyes. I assume you have a plan? The beginning of one. Harrison's meeting tomorrow night. At the Commerce City warehouse. I know. Been tracking his patterns. Simon pulled up surveillance photos on his laptop. That's where they process the victims before distribution. Harrison meets there monthly with his partners to coordinate. His partners being? Mark Nash from the FBI. Edgar Kennedy, who runs a private security firm that handles the actual transportation. And someone I haven't identified yet, financial person who moves the money. Samuel's suspicions about Nash confirmed. How do we prove it? We record the meeting. But here's the thing. That warehouse is a fortress. Armed guards, multiple exits, sophisticated security system. You can't just walk in. What if they invited me? Simon raised an eyebrow. Explain. Samuel laid out his plan. It was risky, possibly suicidal, but it had the advantage of surprise. Harrison thought he was dealing with a desperate, discredited pilot on the edge of a breakdown. He wasn't expecting someone who'd spent 8 years in military intelligence, someone who'd planned operations behind enemy lines. That's crazy, Simon said when Samuel finished. It's perfect. It's both. Simon grinned. I love it. When do we start? Tonight. I need to have a conversation with my wife first. Chapter 6. The Betrayal. Samuel had spent the day preparing, checking equipment, reviewing plans with Simon. Now, at 6 p.m., he sat in his truck outside his own house, watching April through the living room window. She was on the phone, laughing at something, her hair catching the light like it did the day they met. He'd loved her once. Maybe she'd even loved him, before Harrison's money and promises turned her into something unrecognizable. Samuel used his key to enter quietly. April was still on the phone in the kitchen, her back to him. No, he's been staying at a hotel. Yes, I'm fine. Honestly, it's a relief to have the house to myself. Samuel leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. Who's on the phone, April? She spun around, face going pale. Samuel, I didn't hear you come in. Clearly. Is that Harrison? Or just one of your friends you're telling stories to about your crazy husband? April ended the call quickly. Samuel, you shouldn't be here. The restraining order. There is no restraining order. Yet. But nice try on the gaslighting. He stepped into the kitchen. I know everything, April. The affair with Harrison. The trafficking operation. How you've been feeding him information about me for 8 months. Her face cycled through emotions, shock, fear, then cold calculation. I don't know what you're talking about. Penny Cunningham told me. Teresa Goodman knew before Harrison had her killed. Did you know about that part? That your boyfriend murders people who get in his way. Teresa killed herself. Stop lying. Samuel's voice cracked like a whip, military command authority he rarely used. I'm done with your lies. I know about the trafficking. I know you helped set me up. I know you testified against me for money and a spot in Harrison's organization. April's mask slipped. Her face hardened, and for a moment Samuel saw the real woman beneath the performance. Cold, calculating, mercenary. Fine, she said flatly. Yes, Reginald and I have been seeing each other. Yes, I told him you were getting suspicious about flight irregularities. But I didn't know about any trafficking, Samuel. I thought it was just corporate espionage, competitive intelligence. You expect me to believe that? I don't care what you believe. April crossed her arms. You were always so self-righteous, so perfect. The war hero, the Boy Scout pilot. Do you know how exhausting it is being married to someone like you? Always doing the right thing, always following the rules. So you helped frame me as insane and criminal. I helped Reginald with a business problem. You were asking too many questions, being too observant. He needed you sidelined. The psych evaluation was supposed to be temporary, just enough to get you out of the cockpit while they handled things. Handled what exactly? Moving 300 kidnapped people through commercial flights. April's face went pale again. 300? No, that's not. Reginald said it was corporate documents, proprietary information. He said you'd stumbled onto a legal but sensitive operation. Despite everything, Samuel believed her on this point. She'd been used too, just differently. Harrison had played them both. April, you need to understand what you're part of. Harrison's trafficking human beings. Immigrants, runaways, vulnerable people. They're being sold. And Teresa Goodman was murdered because she was going to expose it. No. But her voice wavered. Reginald wouldn't. He would. He did. And when this comes out, you'll go down with him unless you help me stop it. April sat down hard in a kitchen chair. I didn't know, she whispered. I swear I didn't know it was that. But you knew enough. You helped destroy my career, my reputation for what? Money? Status? He promised me a life you never could. You were always flying, always gone. He was there, attentive, generous. He made me feel valued. Samuel looked at the woman he'd married and felt nothing but pity and disgust. You sold me out for attention and money. People are dead because of what you helped Harrison do. What do you want from me? The truth. On record. Everything you know about Harrison's operation, his schedule, his contacts. In exchange, I'll try to keep you out of prison. April looked up, tears streaming down her face. Real ones this time. Born of fear rather than manipulation. He'll kill me. Only if I don't kill him first. For the next hour, April talked. She didn't know details about the trafficking. Harrison had kept her compartmentalized, but she knew about money transfers, offshore accounts, meetings with Edgar Kennedy's security firm. She knew Harrison was planning to expand operations, use Continental Apex's new international routes to move people globally. Most importantly, she knew the warehouse location was wrong. Commerce City was the old facility, April said. They moved operations a month ago to a place near Fort Lupton. That's where tomorrow's meeting is. Samuel absorbed this. Penny's information had been solid but outdated. If he'd walked into Commerce City, he'd have found nothing, or worse, a trap. Why did they move? Reginald said someone was getting too close. Someone in local law enforcement was asking questions about the Commerce City property, which meant there were good cops out there, people not in Harrison's pocket. Samuel filed that away. He recorded April's statement on his phone, made her sign a written version. It wouldn't hold up in court, obtained under duress, but it gave him leverage. What happens now? April asked when they finished. You stay here. Don't call Harrison, don't warn him. If you do, I'll make sure every agency in the country knows you were part of this. And if you succeed, then maybe, you get a deal for cooperating. But April. Samuel looked at her coldly. Our marriage is over. When this is done, file for divorce. I don't ever want to see you again. He left her crying at the kitchen table and drove to Simon's apartment, where they had a lot of planning to revise. Chapter 7. The Setup. The Fort Lupton warehouse was a converted meatpacking plant surrounded by empty lots and industrial decay. Perfect for criminal enterprise, isolated, camera-free, easily defensible. Simon had spent the day doing reconnaissance, mapping entries and guard posts. For guards outside, rotating every 3 hours, Simon reported, showing Samuel photos. Inside, we're guessing another 6 to 8. Main meeting happens in the old processing floor. They've converted it into offices. Samuel studied the layout. Security system? Sophisticated. Motion sensors, cameras, probably pressure plates on main entrances. But here's the thing about sophisticated systems. They're designed to keep people out, not necessarily keep people in. Meaning if someone was already inside, hiding before the meeting started, the system wouldn't flag them. It's looking for intrusion, not for someone who's been there all along. Samuel smiled. You're suggesting I break in early. I'm suggesting I break in early, Simon corrected. I know these systems. I can bypass them, plant cameras and mics, and be out before anyone notices. You wait outside with the weapons. Too dangerous. If you're caught, then they kill an old, bitter ex-employee. But if you're caught, you're the mentally unstable pilot everyone already thinks is dangerous. The narrative's already written for you. Simon's expression was serious. Samuel, you're the only one who can take Harrison down legally. You're the witness, the victim, the proof. I'm just a guy with grudge and some useful skills. Samuel didn't like it, but Simon was right. What's the timeline? Meeting starts at 9 p.m. tomorrow. I go in at 2 p.m., hide in the ventilation system. Those old meatpacking plants have massive ducts, easy to navigate. I plan equipment, record everything. At 9:15, when the meeting's in full swing, you create a distraction outside. Guards respond. I slip out with the evidence. What kind of distraction? Simon grinned. The fun kind. I've got enough fireworks and remote triggers to make them think someone's assaulting the place. While they're scrambling, we disappear. It was a solid plan. Maybe too solid, which made Samuel nervous. What am I missing? The fact that Harrison probably has a backup plan. He's smart, connected. Even if we get evidence, he's got lawyers and political protection. That's where the second part comes in, Samuel said. We don't just get evidence. We destroy his operation completely, cut off his money, expose his partners, and make sure he can't rebuild. They spent the evening preparing. Simon's nephew, a hacker named Ira Lane, joined them, 26, brilliant, and morally flexible in ways that would normally concern Samuel but now seemed useful. I can't hack FBI systems, Ira said, but I can absolutely ruin Harrison's financials. Once we have the account numbers from his meeting, I can trace them, freeze them, and send anonymous tips to financial crimes units in multiple jurisdictions. How long would that take? If I had the data? 2 hours, maybe 3. But you need to get me that data first. Samuel looked at the team he'd assembled, a fired maintenance chief, a hacker, and himself, against human traffickers with FBI protection and millions in resources. His phone buzzed. A text from Dolores Richard. Just learned the DA is seeking an arrest warrant for you. They're claiming you're a flight risk. You have maybe 24 hours before they pick you up. Perfect. One more time pressure. Change of plans, Samuel said. We move tonight. Can't wait for tomorrow. Simon checked his watch. It's 8 p.m. now. The facility's active. They're processing people through tonight. More guards, more risk. Also more evidence. If they're actively moving victims, we catch them in the act. That's conspiracy, kidnapping, trafficking, everything. Better than just recording a meeting. Ira pulled up building schematics. If I can get into their network, I can access their security cameras, see what's happening inside in real time. Can you do that from here? If they're using a standard system, yeah. Give me 20 minutes. While Ira worked, Samuel and Simon loaded equipment. Cameras, recording devices, weapons. Samuel checked the Glock Simon had given him, loaded and chambered around. He'd never planned to use violence in civilian life, but Harrison had made that choice for him. Got it, Ira announced. His laptop showed multiple camera feeds from inside the warehouse. The main floor showed terrified people, mostly young women and teenage boys, huddled in a fenced area. Guards with automatic weapons patrolled. Samuel's jaw tightened. How many hostages? Looks like 30, maybe 40. We need to get them out. Samuel, that's not the mission, Simon warned. We're here to gather evidence, not stage a rescue. Those people are evidence. Living, breathing proof of what Harrison's doing. Samuel was already changing plans in his head. We get them out, they become witnesses. Multiple testimonies, different stories, impossible to discredit. Also impossible to do quietly, Simon pointed out. Samuel thought about it, remembering combat planning. The difference between surgical strikes and scorched earth. Sometimes you needed fire to burn out corruption. Then we don't do it quietly. We call every news organization in Denver. Tell them there's a human trafficking rescue happening at this location. Give them 30 minutes to get crews there. Then we hit the warehouse hard and fast, free the hostages, and let the news cameras document everything. Simon stared at him. That's insane. We'll have police, FBI, everyone. Good. Let Nash try to cover this up with 50 cameras rolling. Ira was grinning. I love it. Let me start making calls. I know some independent journalists who'd kill for this story. One problem, Simon said. We're 3 people against at least 10 armed guards. No, Samuel corrected. We're 3 people with surprise, superior planning, and the moral high ground. Plus, I spent 8 years teaching Air Force pilots how to think tactically. Trust me, I know how to use limited resources against superior numbers. He pulled up the warehouse layout, started marking positions. Simon, you're on communications and technical support. Ira, you keep hacking, kill their security system on my signal, lock the guards' radios, whatever chaos you can create digitally. I'll handle the physical assault. You mean you're going in alone? I'm trained for this. You're not. Simon grabbed Samuel's arm. You die in there, this whole thing dies with you. I'm not planning to die. I'm planning to win. Samuel met his eyes. Harrison took everything from me. My career, my reputation, my marriage. He's trafficking human beings for profit. This ends tonight, one way or another. Chapter 8. The Assault. At 10:37 p.m., Samuel crouched in the darkness behind the Fort Lupton warehouse, listening to 3 different news vans park on the access road a quarter-mile away. Ira had done his job. Reporters were gathering, confused but excited about the tip they'd received about a breaking story. Simon's voice crackled through Samuel's earpiece. Security system is compromised. I can kill cameras and locks on your signal. Stand by. Samuel had changed into dark tactical gear, face covered, looking like any other military contractor. The Glock was holstered at his hip, a tactical knife strapped to his ankle. He'd brought smoke grenades, flashbangs, and zip ties. This wasn't about killing. It was about overwhelming force and rescue. Through the warehouse windows, he could see guards patrolling. The hostages were still pinned on the main floor. On the second level, in what looked like a converted office, he spotted Reginald Harrison talking with 2 other men. One had to be Mark Nash, the other probably Edgar Kennedy. Ira, can you ID the men with Harrison? Running facial recognition now, confirmed. Mark Nash, FBI. Edgar Kennedy, owner of Kodiak Security Solutions. And there's a woman. Ira paused. Holy shit. That's Lee Baker. She's a federal prosecutor. A prosecutor. That explained how they'd manipulated evidence so easily. The conspiracy went deeper than Samuel had thought. How many guards? Samuel asked. 8 visible. Probably 2 more in the office with the bosses. 10-1 odds. Samuel had faced worse in Syria. Kill the power in 30 seconds, Samuel ordered. I'm going in through the south loading dock. Samuel. 30 seconds. He moved to the loading dock, picked the lock quietly. The door opened on oiled hinges. These people were professional, which meant they'd be harder to panic. The lights died. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in red. Samuel slipped inside. The guards immediately went to high alert, speaking into radios that Ira had jammed. Confusion first, then organization. They were well trained. Samuel watched them form a perimeter around the hostages, weapons ready. Time to change their priorities. He pulled a smoke grenade, tossed it toward the west side. White smoke billowed. Shouts. Guards moved toward the smoke. Samuel circled east, staying low, using old machinery as cover. He reached the hostage pen, a chain link enclosure. The people inside looked terrified, convinced this was something worse. I'm here to help, Samuel whispered. Stay quiet. He cut the lock with bolt cutters, swung the gate open. When I tell you, run for the south loading dock. There's a road a quarter-mile east. Run there. A teenage girl with a bruised face looked at him. Who are you? Someone who's very angry. Gunfire erupted. The guards had found the smoke grenade, realized it was a diversion. Samuel heard them coordinating, closing in. Now, he shouted to the hostages. Run. They scattered like startled birds, streaming toward the exit. Samuel provided covering fire, not aiming to kill, but to suppress. The guards were caught between chasing hostages and returning fire. Chaos. Perfect chaos. Samuel moved toward the stairs to the second level. He needed Harrison, Nash, and the others on record, admitting everything. But as he reached the stairwell, a massive figure blocked his path. Edgar Kennedy, 6'5" of former Special Forces muscle. You're the pilot, Kennedy said, raising a pistol. Samuel dove right as Kennedy fired. The bullet sparked off metal. Samuel rolled, came up with his Glock, but Kennedy was already moving with the fluid grace of professional training. They traded shots in the narrow stairwell, neither hitting. Kennedy was good, better than Samuel expected. This wasn't some corporate security goon. This was someone with real combat experience. You're outnumbered and outgunned, Kennedy called. Walk away now, maybe you survive. Not my style. Samuel threw a flashbang. Kennedy turned away but wasn't fully blinded. He'd closed his eyes at the last second. The man had instincts. They collided in the stairwell, fighting hand to hand. Kennedy had size and strength, but Samuel had desperation and 8 years of close-quarters combat training. They grappled, slammed against walls, each looking for an advantage. Kennedy got a hand on Samuel's throat, started squeezing. Samuel went for the tactical knife at his ankle, brought it up fast. Kennedy barely dodged, lost his grip. Samuel pressed the advantage, landed 3 quick strikes, solar plexus, knee, jaw. Kennedy staggered. Samuel followed with a leg sweep that sent the bigger man tumbling down the stairs. "Stay down," Samuel ordered, but Kennedy was already reaching for his dropped pistol. Samuel shot first. Not to kill, he aimed for Kennedy's shoulder. The man went down hard, cursing. "Zip ties." Samuel secured Kennedy's hands, feet. "You're done." He climbed the stairs to the second level. The office door was locked. Through the window, he saw Harrison, Nash, and Prosecutor Baker trying to access a wall safe, clearly planning to destroy evidence. Samuel kicked the door open. 3 faces turned toward him, 3 expressions of shock. "Meeting's over," Samuel said, leveling his Glock. "Get away from that safe." Nash went for his FBI-issue weapon. Samuel shot the desk next to his hand. "Don't. You're making a serious mistake," Harrison said, but his voice shook. "Assaulting federal officers, breaking and entering. Human trafficking, conspiracy, murder. Yeah, let's compare charges." Samuel pulled out his phone, started recording. "Reginald Harrison, CEO of Continental Apex Airlines. Want to explain to the camera why you've got 40 kidnapped people in your warehouse?" "They're not kidnapped there." "Stop," Prosecutor Lee Baker interrupted. "Everyone shut up. We have rights. We don't have to say anything." "That's your legal advice?" Samuel kept the camera rolling. "You're a federal prosecutor who helped traffic human beings. History won't be kind." Sirens wailed in the distance. Multiple sirens, police, ambulances, the cavalry responding to reports of gunfire and screaming people running from a warehouse. "Those hostages are outside talking to news cameras right now," Samuel said, "telling their stories. You think your political connections can bury 40 witnesses and a dozen reporters?" Harrison's face had gone gray. "We can make a deal. I don't make deals with slavers." The office door burst open. Police swarmed in, weapons drawn. Samuel dropped his gun immediately, raised his hands. Samuel heard, "Denver PD. On the ground now." Samuel complied, getting face down. "These 3 are part of a human trafficking conspiracy. There's a wounded man on the stairs who's their head of security. All armed and dangerous." An officer pulled Samuel to his feet, cuffed him. Through the window, he saw the warehouse floor swarming with police and EMTs helping the freed hostages. News cameras were rolling, capturing everything. Mission accomplished. Chapter 9, Vindication. The interrogation room at Denver Police Headquarters was familiar territory. Samuel had been in similar rooms dozens of times over the past week. But this time, the dynamic was different. This time, the detectives looked at him with respect rather than suspicion. Detective Randy Clark, a 20-year veteran with intelligent eyes, sat across from Samuel. "You want to tell me what the hell happened tonight?" Samuel had called Dolores Richard before saying anything. She'd arrived within an hour, and now sat beside him looking both furious and impressed. "My client is willing to cooperate fully," Dolores said. "But we want immunity for tonight's actions in exchange for his testimony against Harrison, Nash, Kennedy, and Baker." Clark leaned back. "You're in a bad position to negotiate." "Am I?" "Because from where I'm sitting, my client just exposed a human trafficking ring involving an FBI agent, a federal prosecutor, and a major airline CEO. He rescued 40 victims and handed you the biggest case of your career. Sure, he technically committed B&E and assault, but somehow I think the DA will find prosecuting him problematic." Clark smiled slightly. "Counselor, your client assaulted a federal building, warehouse, private property, shot a man. In self-defense. Kennedy fired first, as the ballistics will show, and interfered with an FBI investigation. FBI agent Nash was the subject, not the investigator. Your internal affairs people are going to love that one." They went back and forth for another hour. Finally, Clark left to consult with his superiors. While he was gone, Dolores turned to Samuel. "That was spectacularly reckless. I know. You could have died. I know. It was also brilliant." The The news coverage alone makes it impossible to bury this. You played it perfectly. Through the two-way mirror, Samuel could see people moving. FBI agents and windbreakers, police brass, people with serious expressions having serious conversations. The warehouse raid had kicked over a hornet's nest of federal and local jurisdictions, all scrambling to claim credit or avoid blame. Clark returned. Okay, here's the deal. You give us everything. Documents, recordings, witnesses, testimony. In exchange, no charges for tonight. But Samuel, if you're lying, if any of this is fabricated. It's not. Over the next 6 hours, Samuel laid it all out. Penny Cunningham's evidence. Simon Pineda's documentation of aircraft modifications. April's testimony about Harrison's operation. Ira Lane's digital forensics. The recordings from the warehouse. The 40 freed victims who were now being interviewed by multiple agencies. The FBI's Internal Affairs Division arrived to take over the interrogation of Nash. The U.S. Attorney's Office sent prosecutors to handle Baker. Harrison and Kennedy were being held separately, each demanding lawyers, each trying to cut deals. By morning, the story was national news. Airline CEO arrested in massive human trafficking ring, ran on every network. Harrison's carefully crafted public image crumbled as reporters dug into his background, finding shell companies, offshore accounts, and a trail of suspicious deaths. Samuel was released at 7 a.m., exhausted but clear-headed. Dolores walked him to the parking lot. What happens now, he asked. Now? You become the star witness in multiple federal trials. You'll spend months in depositions and testimony. The airline will probably be sued into bankruptcy. And you, she smiled, you'll get your life back. Don't want my old life back. Then make a new one. But Samuel, what you did, rescuing those people, exposing this conspiracy, that matters. Those 40 people are alive and free because of you. He nodded, feeling the weight of it. Not just victory, but the cost. Penny Cunningham would testify, but she'd lost her best friend. Simon Pineda had gotten revenge, but couldn't get back his 23-year career. Ira Lane was facing his own legal scrutiny for the hacking, though Clark had indicated they'd likely overlook it given the circumstances. And April, she was being held as a material witness, facing possible charges. Samuel felt nothing for her except pity. She'd traded her soul for promises of a better life and ended up with nothing. His phone buzzed. A text from Charlie Harper. I'm sorry I doubted you. I should have trusted you. When you're ready to talk, I'm here. Small mercies. Samuel drove to Simon's apartment. They'd agreed to meet at 8 a.m., win or lose. When he arrived, Simon and Ira were on the couch, watching news coverage. There he is, Simon said, grinning. The man who brought down an empire. We brought it down, Samuel corrected. Couldn't have done it without you. They sat in comfortable silence, watching reporters interview the freed victims. One young woman, the teenager Samuel had spoken to in the warehouse, was tearfully thanking the man in black who saved us. She didn't know his name, which was fine. This wasn't about glory. What will you do now? Ira asked. Samuel thought about it. His pilot's license would be reinstated once the investigation concluded. Continental Apex was already falling over themselves to clear his name and avoid liability. But did he want to go back to flying? I think I might start something new, Samuel said slowly. Help people who've been trafficked. Use my experience, my contacts. There are a lot of victims out there who need someone to fight for them. That's a good mission, Simon said. Better than maintenance. Or hacking, Ira added. They all laughed, the kind of laughter that comes after surviving something terrible. 3 months later, Samuel sat in a federal courtroom and watched Reginald Harrison receive a sentence of 45 years without parole. Mark Nash got 35 years. Edgar Kennedy, 28. Lee Baker, stripped of her law license and facing 20 years, broke down crying during sentencing. April had cut a deal, 5 years probation in exchange for complete cooperation. Samuel saw her once during the proceedings, but they didn't speak. There was nothing left to say. The 40 rescued victims had been provided with counseling, legal assistance, and in some cases, paths to citizenship. Many had testified during the trials, speaking truth to power with voices that couldn't be silenced. Penny Cunningham had received job offers from 3 airlines who wanted to show they took safety and ethics seriously. She'd accepted one, became a vocal advocate for whistleblower protections. Simon and Ira had started a consulting business helping companies identify and prevent internal corruption. They were doing well, sleeping better than they had in years. And Samuel had launched the Teresa Goodman Foundation, named for the flight attendant who tried to expose the truth and paid with her life. The foundation helped trafficking survivors rebuild their lives, provided resources for investigation of suspected trafficking operations, and trained law enforcement on how to recognize and respond to these crimes. He'd never flown commercially again. That part of his life was over. But he'd found something better: purpose, meaning, and the knowledge that he'd made a difference. On the courthouse steps, a reporter asked him how it felt to be vindicated. Samuel thought about it, remembered the moment he'd opened the cockpit door to find all those empty seats, the journey from confusion to understanding to action. Vindication is good, he said finally, but justice is better. And making sure this never happens again, that's the real victory. He walked away from the cameras, away from the story that would define him for years to come. In his pocket was a photo of the 40 people he'd saved, sent to him by the teenage girl from the warehouse. On the back, she'd written, "Thank you for seeing us when everyone else looked away." That was enough. That would always be enough. The ghost flight had landed, and Samuel Hurd had finally come home. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there. Welcome back to another story on Infidelity Tales Lab. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Foundation. Heath Barnes stood at the edge of the forward operating base, watching the Afghan sunrise paint the mountains in shades of gold and crimson. 15 years of marriage felt like a lifetime ago, though it had only been 8 months since his deployment began. The wedding photo in his vest pocket was creased from handling, showing a younger version of himself beside Tanya Barnes, her auburn hair catching the church light. Their twins, Emma and Justin, barely 3 years old at the time, now 15 and questioning everything. Heath had built his life like he built his military career, methodically, with purpose and absolute loyalty to those who earned it. The son of a steel worker from Pittsburgh, he'd enlisted at 18, worked his way up to Master Sergeant, specialized in intelligence operations. His mind was wired for strategy, for seeing 3 moves ahead, for understanding that information was the most powerful weapon in any arsenal. Tanya had been different when they met. A nursing student with ambitious dreams and a laugh that could light up a room. She'd said she loved his intensity, his dedication. "You're my rock, Heath," she'd whispered during those early years when money was tight and the future uncertain. They'd built something together. A house in suburbia, careers that mattered, children who were their pride. But somewhere along the way, the foundation had begun to crack. Heath noticed it in the months before deployment. The way Tanya's eyes would drift during conversations, how she'd grown distant when he talked about re-enlisting for another tour. She'd started working late more often, claiming the hospital needed extra coverage. Her phone had gained a password. Small things. But Heath Barnes didn't survive 15 years in military intelligence by ignoring small things. "Barnes," Sergeant Wiley Cooper's voice cut through the morning air. "Command wants to see you." Heath tucked the photo away and headed toward the command tent. Cooper had been his closest friend since basic training, a man who understood that brotherhood meant having each other's backs no matter what. They'd saved each other's lives more times than either cared to count, but more importantly, they'd saved each other's sanity. The debriefing was routine. Intelligence reports, tactical assessments, the endless bureaucracy of modern warfare. But Heath's mind kept drifting to the email he'd received that morning. Tanya had written about the twins' school activities, neighborhood gossip, her work schedule, all surface-level chatter that said nothing while filling paragraphs. It was the email of someone with secrets. After the briefing, Cooper pulled him aside. "You've been off lately, brother. What's eating at you?" Heath studied his friend's weathered face. Cooper wasn't just a soldier. He was a man who'd built a network of contacts across 3 continents. Someone who could make things happen or disappear with equal efficiency. "Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. I can't shake the feeling that something's wrong at home." Women get lonely during deployments. It's natural. Not Tanya. Heath's voice carried absolute certainty. She's too proud, too strong. If she was just lonely, she'd tell me. This is something else. Cooper nodded slowly. In her line of work, instincts kept you alive. What do you need? Information. But quietly. I could be wrong, and if I am... Heath let the sentence hang. And if you're right? Heath's expression hardened, revealing the man who'd earned respect through competence and fear through necessity. Then someone's about to learn why crossing Heath Barnes is the worst mistake they'll ever make. That evening, Heath sat in his quarters writing a letter to his children. The twins were sophomores now, old enough to understand that the world wasn't always fair, but young enough to still believe in heroes. He wrote about duty, about honor, about the importance of keeping your word even when others didn't. He wrote about consequences. 3 days later, Cooper returned with a file that changed everything. Chapter 2. The Betrayal. Tanya Barnes stood in front of her bedroom mirror, adjusting the necklace Kurt Russell had given her the week before. The emerald pendant caught the light, and for a moment, she felt beautiful again. Not like the wife of a soldier who'd been gone for 8 months. Not like the mother of teenagers who barely acknowledged her existence, but like a woman desired for who she was. Kurt's hands slipped around her waist from behind, his reflection joining hers in the mirror. You sure about tonight? We could just stay in. She leaned back against his chest, inhaling his cologne, something expensive and sophisticated that Heath would never think to wear. Emma's at soccer practice until 9. Justin's at his friend's house. We have time. Kurt Russell was everything Heath wasn't. Spontaneous where Heath was methodical, charming where Heath was intense, present where Heath was deployed. A successful real estate developer with silver at his temples and a smile that made women forget their problems. He'd swept into Tanya's life 6 months ago when she'd been at her lowest point, feeling abandoned and forgotten. I still can't believe you're married to a soldier, Kurt murmured, pressing his lips to her neck. You're too vibrant to be a military wife, living your life around someone else's schedule. Tanya had heard variations of this speech before, and each time it reinforced what she'd already begun to believe, that Heath had never truly seen her, never appreciated what he had. 15 years of marriage, and what did she have to show for it? A husband who chose duty over family, children who were growing up without a father figure, and a life that felt increasingly hollow. He wasn't always like this, she said, though the defense felt automatic now. When we were younger, he was different, more present. People change, Kurt said, spinning her around to face him. The question is, what are you going to do about it? The affair had started innocently enough. Kurt had been helping her refinance the house, something Heath should have been there to handle, and their professional relationship had gradually become personal. Coffee meetings that stretched into lunch, lunch meetings that became dinners, dinners that became something Tanya hadn't felt in years, appreciated. Kurt made her feel like the most important person in the room. He remembered details about her dreams, asked about her nursing career, listened when she talked about feeling trapped in a life that no longer fit. He didn't speak in military jargon or discuss deployment schedules. He spoke about art, travel, possibilities. I've been thinking, Kurt said, leading her to the bed that she'd shared with Heath for 10 years. About us. About what comes next. Tanya's pulse quickened. They'd danced around this conversation for weeks, both knowing that what they had couldn't remain hidden forever. What do you mean? I want more than stolen moments. I want you, Tanya. Really want you. All of you. She searched his face, seeing something she'd craved for so long. Certainty. Heath lived in shades of gray, in contingency plans and tactical considerations. Kurt offered something simpler and infinitely more appealing. A choice. He'll never give me a divorce easily, she said. Heath doesn't lose. It's not in his nature. Kurt's expression grew serious. Then we make it easy for him. File first, catch him off guard. My lawyer says deployment can be considered abandonment if we frame it right, especially with his history of choosing military commitments over family. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Merlin Bailey, Kurt's lawyer, had outlined a strategy that would paint Heath as an absent father who prioritized his career over his children's well-being. The deployment was just the latest example of a pattern that stretched back years. With the right documentation, the right testimony, they could build a case for sole custody that would be difficult to challenge from overseas. The children will adjust, Kurt said firmly. Kids are resilient, and they'll be better off with stability, with a father figure who's actually here. Tanya wanted to believe him. The alternative, continuing to live half a life while waiting for a husband who might never truly come home, felt unbearable. She thought about Emma's last school play, where she'd scanned the audience for Heath's face and found only an empty seat. She thought about Justin's birthday, when Heath had called for 10 minutes between missions, his voice distracted and distant. When? She asked. Tomorrow. Bailey says timing is everything. If we file while he's deployed, it reinforces the abandonment narrative. That night, after Kurt left and the children were asleep, Tanya sat at her computer composing the email that would end her marriage. She wrote about the necessity of moving forward, about doing what was best for the children, about decisions that couldn't wait for his return. She wrote with the conviction of someone who'd already crossed a line and found the other side more comfortable than expected. She clicked send without reading it twice. 3,000 miles away, Heath Barnes read the message in his quarters, his expression never changing. Then he walked across the base to find Wiley Cooper, carrying the file his friend had prepared, a file that contained photographs, financial records, and a timeline that painted a very different picture of Tanya's last 6 months. Understood, Heath had written back, his fingers steady on the keyboard. It was the last word his wife would receive from him directly. Chapter 3. The Response. The secure satellite phone in Heath quarters buzzed at 0347 hours. He'd been awake for 20 minutes, staring at the ceiling and calculating. The voice on the other end was crisp, professional, and familiar. Sergeant Barnes? This is Merlin Bailey, attorney at law, representing your wife in... I know who you are, Heath interrupted, his voice carrying the flat authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. The question is, do you know who I am? There was a pause. In that silence, Heath could hear the exact moment Bailey realized he'd made a catastrophic error in judgment. Sir, I think there may have been some miscommunication regarding... No miscommunication, counselor. Your client filed for divorce and sole custody of my children. You're claiming my deployment constitutes abandonment. That's not miscommunication. That's war. Heath had spent the previous 72 hours doing what he did best, gathering intelligence and formulating strategy. The file Cooper had assembled was comprehensive, but it was only the beginning. Heath Barnes didn't just react to threats. He eliminated them with surgical precision. Mr. Barnes, if we could just discuss this reasonably. Reasonable ended when you decided to use my service to this country as ammunition against me. Reasonable ended when you thought you could separate me from my children while I'm defending the very freedom that allows you to practice law. Heath's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. I'm coming home, Bailey. And when I do, you're going to discover exactly why people who cross me don't get second chances. The line went dead. Bailey stared at his phone, sweat beading on his forehead despite the air conditioning in his downtown office. He'd handled hundreds of divorce cases, dealt with angry spouses, military personnel, custody battles. But something in Heath Barnes' voice suggested this wasn't going to be a standard proceeding. Within an hour, Bailey was researching his opponent. What he found made his blood run cold. Master Sergeant Heath Barnes wasn't just any deployed soldier. He was a 15-year veteran of military intelligence with 3 tours in Afghanistan, 2 in Iraq, and classified assignments across Eastern Europe. His record was exemplary, his commendations extensive, and his security clearance high enough to make Bailey's lawyer brain start calculating potential lawsuits for defamation of character. But it was the personal details that truly worried him. Heath Barnes had grown up in a rough neighborhood, earned his way into the military through determination and ruthlessness. He'd built his career on understanding enemies, exploiting weaknesses, and never backing down from a fight. The man Bailey was facing across a legal battlefield wasn't just a soldier. He was a strategist with the resources and connections to make problems disappear. Bailey picked up his phone and dialed Tanya Barnes. "How's everything going?" she asked, her voice bright with anticipation. "We need to talk. In person. Now. What's wrong? He can't fight this from overseas, can he?" "You said." "I said a lot of things before I knew who your husband was," Bailey interrupted. "Meet me in my office in 1 hour. And bring Kurt Russell with you." When they arrived, Bailey's office felt smaller than usual. Tanya sat rigidly in her chair, while Kurt paced behind her, his usual confidence replaced by obvious anxiety. "What exactly did you tell me about your husband's military service?" Bailey asked. "That he's deployed, that he chooses the military over his family, that... Did you tell me he was military intelligence? Did you mention his security clearance? His commendations? The fact that he spent 15 years building relationships with people who can make or break careers?" Tanya's face paled. "Does it matter? He's still gone. He's still choosing duty over family." Bailey opened his laptop and turned it toward them. Heath Barnes' service record filled the screen. The parts that weren't classified. "Anyway, your husband isn't just deployed, Mrs. Barnes. He's a decorated veteran with an exemplary record who's currently serving his country in active combat. Any judge is going to see our abandonment claim as not just frivolous, but disrespectful." Kurt leaned forward, his jaw tight. "So we adjust the strategy. Every marriage has problems. We focus on irreconcilable differences, split custody." "You don't understand," Bailey said. "This isn't about legal strategy anymore. Your husband knows about the affair." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Tanya's hand flew to her throat, fingers finding the emerald necklace Kurt had given her. "How could he know? He's been gone for 8 months. Military intelligence," Bailey said grimly. "These people have resources we can't even imagine. And based on our conversation this morning, he's not just informed, he's planning something." Kurt's face flushed red. "Let him plan. He's 3,000 miles away, playing soldier, while I'm here taking care of his wife and children. What's he going to do? Send me a strongly worded letter." Bailey studied Kurt Russell with the expression of a man watching someone walk into traffic. "Mr. Russell, in my professional opinion, you should be very, very careful. Men like Heath Barnes don't make empty threats." "Men like Heath Barnes don't scare me," Kurt replied, but his voice lacked conviction. What none of them knew was that Heath Barnes was already en route home. Emergency leave had been arranged through channels Bailey couldn't access, using connections he couldn't imagine. While they sat in the lawyer's office debating strategy, Heath was 30,000 feet above the Atlantic, reviewing intelligence reports and making his own plans. The hunter was coming home, and the prey had no idea what was waiting for them. Chapter 4. The Hunter Returns. Heath Barnes stepped off the plane at Denver International Airport wearing civilian clothes that couldn't hide the predatory stillness in his movements. He'd lost weight during deployment, his face leaner and harder, his eyes carrying the flat assessment of someone who'd spent months evaluating threats and eliminating them. Wiley Cooper waited in the terminal, holding a duffel bag and wearing the expression of a man about to hand someone a loaded weapon. "Welcome home, brother." They embraced briefly. The efficient contact of soldiers who understood that sentiment was a luxury they couldn't afford. "Status report," Heath said. "Everything you need is in the bag. Documentation, surveillance photos, financial records, communications intercepts." Cooper's voice was neutral, professional. "Your wife has been busy." They walked through the terminal in silence. Two men who'd learned that words were less reliable than actions. Outside, Cooper's truck waited in the short-term parking garage. As they drove toward the city, Cooper briefed Heath with military precision. Tanya Barnes and Kurt Russell have been conducting their affair for approximately 6 months. They've been careless. Public restaurants, her house when the children are at school, his condo downtown. Russell's been positioning himself as a father figure to Emma and Justin, attending school events, helping with homework. Heath's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. The children's reaction? Mixed. Emma seems resistant. She's loyal to you. Justin's more receptive, probably because he's angry about the deployment. Russell's been smart about it, playing the fun uncle role rather than trying to replace you directly. Financial situation? Russell's been paying for dinners, gifts, small things. But there's more. Cooper handed Heath a tablet containing bank records. Tanya opened a separate checking account 3 weeks ago. She's been moving money systematically, small amounts but consistent. Heath studied the numbers with the focus he'd once applied to enemy troop movements. She's planning to disappear. That's my assessment. Russell's got property in Colorado Springs, a cabin in Aspen, connections in California. The divorce filing was just the opening move. They pulled into the parking lot of a nondescript office building. Where are we? Safe House. Douglas Schaefer runs a private security firm. All former military, all people who owe you favors. We've got surveillance equipment, communication intercepts, and most importantly, we've got legal cover for everything we're about to do. Heath followed Cooper inside, noting the professional setup. Multiple computer screens, sophisticated surveillance equipment, and 3 men he recognized from various deployments. These weren't just soldiers. They were specialists in information warfare, psychological operations, and strategic planning. Douglas Schaefer stood as they entered, his presence commanding despite his civilian attire. Sergeant Barnes, I've reviewed your situation. My assessment is that you're dealing with people who fundamentally misunderstood the nature of the conflict they've initiated. Meaning, they think this is a divorce proceeding. You understand it's a war. Schaefer gestured to the wall of monitors displaying surveillance footage, financial records, and communication logs. We've been preparing accordingly. For the next 4 hours, Heath absorbed intelligence that painted a complete picture of his wife's betrayal. The affair wasn't just physical, it was strategic. Russell had been systematically inserting himself into every aspect of Tanya's life, positioning himself as the stable alternative to Heath's military commitments. But more concerning were the communications they'd intercepted between Tanya and Kurt about the children. They weren't just planning to divorce Heath. They were planning to erase him entirely. Kurt had been researching boarding schools, private academies, places where the children could be isolated from Heath's influence. They're moving faster than anticipated, Schaefer reported. Russell's been pushing Tanya to relocate to California after the divorce is finalized. He's already put an offer on a house in San Diego. Heath set down the tablet, his expression unreadable. Timeline. Based on their communications, they expect the divorce to be finalized within 3 months. They're planning to relocate immediately afterward, claiming it's for Tanya's career opportunities. And my children would disappear into California's family court system, 3 states away from any meaningful contact with you. Heath stood and walked to the window overlooking the city where he'd built his life, where his children were growing up believing their father had abandoned them. Options. Cooper joined him at the window. We could go legal, hire better lawyers, fight the custody battle, expose the affair. Might work, might not. Depends on the judge, on how well Russell's positioned himself. Or, we remind them that crossing Heath Barnes has consequences. Heath turned back to the room, studying the faces of men who'd followed him into combat, who understood that some battles couldn't be won through conventional means. I want them to understand something very clearly. They've made the worst mistake of their lives. But I want them to reach that understanding slowly, completely, and with absolute certainty that there's no way back. Schaefer smiled, a cold expression that didn't reach his eyes. What did you have in mind? Total warfare. But surgical. Precise. They want to play games with my family, my children, my life? Then they're going to learn exactly how those games end when played against someone who wrote the rulebook. Heath Barnes had spent 15 years learning how to destroy enemies without leaving fingerprints. Now he was going to apply those skills to protecting what mattered most. The war was about to begin. Chapter 5. The Trap Closes. Kurt Russell stared at his phone, reading the text message for the 3rd time. Your loan application has been declined. Please contact your loan officer immediately. The construction project in Denver, his largest development deal, the one that would secure his financial future, was supposed to be fully funded by now. He dialed his banker, fingers drumming impatiently on his mahogany desk. Michael, it's Kurt Russell. I just got a message about my loan application being declined. There must be some mistake. The pause on the other end stretched too long. Kurt, we need to talk. In person. There have been some complications with your credit profile. Complications? My credit score is pristine. I've been banking with you for 8 years. Can you come in this afternoon? 3 o'clock. Kurt ended the call, unease creeping up his spine. In the past week, small things have been going wrong. His usual lunch reservation at Enzo's had been mysteriously canceled. His golf club membership had encountered administrative delays in renewal. His cleaning lady had suddenly become unavailable. Individual incidents, each explainable. Together, they formed a pattern that made Kurt's throat tight. Meanwhile, across town, Tanya Barnes sat in Merlin Bailey's office, watching her lawyer pace behind his desk like a caged animal. The confident man who'd assured her of an easy victory had been replaced by someone who jumped at phone calls and kept checking the locks on his office door. The situation has become complex, Bailey said, not meeting her eyes. How complex? You said Heath couldn't fight this from overseas. That was before I understood who Heath Barnes actually is. Bailey pulled up a file on his computer. Do you know what your husband did in Eastern Europe? The classified assignments, the connections he's built? Tanya shook her head, feeling suddenly very young and very naive. Neither do I. And that's the problem. Men with his background, his clearance level, his network, they don't just disappear quietly when their families are threatened. Before Tanya could respond, Bailey's phone rang. He answered with visible reluctance. Yes? What do you mean suspended? I've been a member of the Colorado Bar Association for 15 years. What complaint? Who filed it? Tanya watched her lawyer's face drain of color as he listened. When he hung up, his hands were shaking. What's happening? She whispered. Someone filed an ethics complaint against me. They're questioning my handling of your case, claiming I misrepresented facts to the court. Bailey's voice was hollow. The complaint includes documentation I've never seen before. Evidence of your affair, financial records, communication logs. That's impossible. How could they have? I don't know. But whoever's doing this, they're not just targeting me. They're building a comprehensive case against both of us. At 3 o'clock, Kurt Russell sat across from his banker, watching 8 years of carefully built credit relationships crumble. Someone had provided the bank with information suggesting Kurt had misrepresented his assets, inflated his income, and concealed existing debts. This is insane, Kurt protested. Every document I've provided is legitimate. Run the checks again. We did. Multiple times. The banker slid a folder across the table. According to this information, you've been operating under false pretenses for months. The IRS has been notified. Kurt's vision blurred. The IRS? For what? Unreported income. Questionable business expenses. Someone provided them with very detailed records of cash transactions you've been making. The cash transactions. Kurt's stomach dropped as he realized what they were referring to. The gifts he'd been buying Tanya, the dinners, the small expenses he'd been handling off the books to avoid creating a paper trail of the affair. Someone had been watching. Someone had been documenting. Someone had turned his attempts at discretion into evidence of financial impropriety. That evening, Heath Barnes sat in a rented SUV across the street from his own house, watching Kurt Russell's BMW in his driveway. His children were inside. Emma, probably doing homework, Justin likely playing video games. Tanya was cooking dinner for another man in the kitchen where Heath had proposed to her 15 years ago. His phone buzzed with updates from the team. Kurt's financial empire was collapsing systematically. Bailey's law practice was under investigation. Tanya's new bank account had been flagged for suspicious activity. But Heath wasn't satisfied with financial pressure. This was personal. He dialed a number from memory. Joey Golden? It's Heath Barnes. Yeah, I know it's been a while. I need a favor. Joey Golden ran the most successful construction company in Denver, built on military contracts and veteran hiring. He also happened to be Kurt Russell's biggest competitor. Remember that development project Russell's been working on? The one that's been cutting into your territory? Interesting. And if someone were to provide evidence that Russell's been using substandard materials, falsifying inspection reports, I thought you might be interested. Heath ended the call and dialed another number. Landon Winters? Heath Barnes. I understand you work in social services now. Yes, I have some concerns about the welfare of my children. One by one, Heath activated a network Kurt Russell and Tanya Barnes never knew existed. Military connections, business relationships, professional favors accumulated over 15 years of service. Each contact received carefully curated information, legally obtained documentation, legitimate concerns that required official investigation. Heath wasn't breaking laws. He was simply ensuring that existing laws were enforced with unusual efficiency. By the time Kurt Russell left Heath's house that night, his phone had been buzzing non-stop with crisis calls. His development project was under investigation for safety violations. His real estate license was being reviewed. His tax situation was being audited. And in a cruel twist that made Heath smile for the first time in weeks, Kurt's own lawyer was now recommending he seek separate representation, because continuing to work with Merlin Bailey might constitute a conflict of interest. The trap was closing, but Heath wasn't finished. Tomorrow, he would begin the final phase, making sure Kurt Russell and Tanya Barnes understood exactly what they had lost and what it would cost them. Chapter 6. Face to Face. Heath Barnes stood on his own front porch for the first time in 8 months, key in hand, listening to the sounds of his family inside. Emma's laugh carried from the living room, followed by Kurt Russell's voice telling some story that made her giggle again. The sound hit Heath like a physical blow, not because his daughter was happy, but because she was happy with a man who was systematically destroying her family. He unlocked the door and stepped inside. "Dad!" Emma's voice cracked with surprise and joy as she launched herself from the couch into his arms. For a moment, the months of betrayal and planning fell away, replaced by the simple weight of his daughter's embrace. Justin emerged from the kitchen more slowly, his 15-year-old frame caught between anger and relief. "Mom said you weren't coming back until next month." "Plans changed," Heath said, his eyes finding Kurt Russell frozen on his living room couch like an animal caught in headlights. "Seems like there have been a lot of changes around here." Tanya appeared from the kitchen, her face cycling through shock, guilt, and desperate calculation. "Heath, you didn't call. We weren't expecting. I noticed." Heath's voice carried the flat calm that had made enemy combatants surrender without firing a shot. His gaze moved deliberately between his wife and the man sitting on his furniture, eating dinner with his children, wearing cologne in his house. Kurt Russell stood slowly, attempting to salvage dignity from an impossible situation. "Mr. Barnes, I'm Kurt Russell. I've been helping Tanya while you were deployed." "Helping?" Heath repeated the word like he was testing its weight. "How exactly have you been helping, Mr. Russell?" The question hung in the air while everyone calculated responses. Emma looked confused, sensing undercurrents she didn't understand. Justin's expression was harder, more knowing. He'd figured out at least part of what was happening. "Dad," Emma said, tugging on Heath's sleeve, "Kurt's been taking me to soccer practice, and he helped Justin with his history project. And he fixed the washing machine when it broke." Each word was a knife twist, not because of what Kurt had done, but because Heath hadn't been there to do those things himself. This was the subtle cruelty of the affair, not just sexual betrayal, but the systematic replacement of Heath's role in his children's lives. "That was thoughtful of him," Heath said, his tone giving nothing away. "I'm sure Mr. Russell has been very invested in this family's well-being." Kurt's face flushed red. "Look, Barnes, I know this is awkward, but..." "Awkward?" Heath's eyebrows rose slightly. "Mr. Russell, my wife filed for divorce and sole custody while I was serving my country. She claimed my deployment constituted abandonment of my children. You've been playing house with my family in my absence, and you think this is awkward?" The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Emma stepped closer to Heath, suddenly afraid. Justin crossed his arms, watching the standoff with the intensity of someone learning how men handle crisis. "Heath," Tanya said, her voice strained, "we should talk privately." "No." The word was absolute. "We're done with private conversations. We're done with secrets. Your boyfriend and I are going to have a chat right here, in front of the children whose lives he's been planning to reorganize." Kurt straightened, trying to project authority he didn't possess. "I won't be threatened in front of children." Heath smiled, a cold expression that made Kurt take an involuntary step backward. "Mr. Russell, if I were threatening you, you'd know it." This is conversation. Adult conversation about adult consequences. Heath, please. Tanya stepped between them. Kurt didn't know about the divorce filing. I made that decision on my own. Is that true, Mr. Russell? You had no knowledge of the legal proceedings designed to separate me from my children? Kurt's jaw worked silently. He'd been caught in a lie, and everyone in the room knew it. I thought so. Heath turned to his children. Emma, Justin, go to your rooms. Your mother and Mr. Russell and I need to discuss some grown-up matters. But Dad, now. The authority in Heath's voice brooked no argument. His children obeyed because they recognized something in their father's tone that demanded respect. The voice of a man who'd commanded soldiers in combat, who'd made life-and-death decisions under pressure. Once they were alone, Heath walked to the mantel where family photos displayed 15 years of marriage, birthdays, holidays, milestones. He picked up their wedding photo, studying it like he was seeing it for the first time. Do you remember your vows, Tanya? For better or worse, in sickness and in health. I don't recall an exemption from military deployment. Things change, Heath. People change. You've been gone 8 months. I've been gone 8 months defending the freedom that allows your boyfriend to run his real estate business, your lawyer to practice law, and your children to sleep safely at night. He set down the photo and faced them both. And in 8 months, you decided to erase me from their lives. Kurt found his voice. You were never there anyway. Even before the deployment, you chose the military over family. Tanya deserves better. Heath nodded slowly. You're absolutely right, Mr. Russell. My wife deserves better. She deserves a husband who keeps his promises, who honors his commitments, who doesn't sneak around behind her back. His eyes moved to Tanya. Just like my children deserve a mother who doesn't lie to them about why their father isn't coming home. We were going to tell them. When? After you'd move them to California? After you'd enroll them in schools where I'd never find them? After you'd convinced them their father abandoned them? The color drained from Tanya's face. How did you know about California? About the house in San Diego? About the boarding schools you've been researching? Heath's smile was razor sharp. Tanya, I spent 15 years learning how to find people who don't want to be found. Did you really think you could hide from me? Kurt stepped forward, his face red with anger and fear. What the hell is that supposed to mean? Heath studied him with the detached interest of a scientist examining a specimen. It means, Mr. Russell, that you've made a series of very poor decisions. And now you're going to live with the consequences. Chapter 7. The Reckoning Begins. The next morning, Kurt Russell's phone rang at 5:47 a.m. Half asleep, he answered without checking the caller ID. Mr. Russell? This is Detective Sammy Thornton with Denver PD. We need you to come in for questioning regarding allegations of fraud and harassment. Kurt sat up in bed, instantly awake. What allegations? I haven't done anything. Sir, we've received documentation suggesting you've been engaging in stalking behavior, financial harassment, and potentially contributing to the delinquency of minors. Can you come in this morning? Kurt's mouth went dry. This is insane. Who filed these charges? We'll discuss everything when you come in. Can you be here by 9? After the detective hung up, Kurt's hand shook as he dialed Merlin Bailey's office. The call went straight to voicemail. Due to ongoing legal proceedings, this office is temporarily closed. If this is an emergency, please contact. Kurt threw his phone across the room. Meanwhile, Tanya sat in her car outside Emma's school, reading the letter that had been delivered to her workplace that morning. The hospital administrator wanted to meet with her immediately regarding concerns about professional conduct and potential violations of patient privacy. Her hands trembled as she read. Someone had reported that Tanya had been accessing patient records without authorization, using hospital computers for personal business, and taking excessive personal time during work hours. All technically true. She'd been researching divorce attorneys during breaks, using the hospital's internet to communicate with Kurt, and yes, she looked up Heath's medical records to see if there was anything she could use in the custody battle. Individual minor infractions that, when compiled and presented professionally, painted a picture of someone who couldn't be trusted with patient information. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Check the mailbox at home. Tanya drove home with growing dread. In the mailbox, She found copies of financial documents she'd never seen before. Bank statements, credit reports, transaction records that showed every gift Kurt had given her, every dinner he'd paid for, every expense that could be interpreted as a married woman accepting financial support from a man who wasn't her husband. But it was the final document that made her legs weak, a psychological evaluation request from the family court, triggered by anonymous concerns about the children's welfare. Someone had reported that Emma and Justin were being exposed to an unstable home environment, that their mother was having an affair, that a non-relative male was having inappropriate influence over minor children. The evaluation would be thorough, invasive, and permanent part of the court record. Heath Barnes sat in his truck outside Kurt Russell's office building, watching chaos unfold through binoculars. Police cars, investigators, former employees leaving with boxes of personal items. Kurt's real estate empire was collapsing with surgical precision. Joey Golden's construction company had provided evidence of Kurt's substandard building practices. The IRS had found irregularities in his tax filings. The state licensing board was investigating complaints about his professional conduct. Each investigation was legitimate, triggered by real evidence, conducted by professionals doing their jobs. Heath's phone rang. Target acquired. Came Wiley Cooper's voice. Status. Russell just left the police station. He's panicked, making calls, driving erratically. Should I maintain surveillance? Negative. Let him sweat. What about Tanya? She's at the hospital meeting with administrators. Preliminary reports suggest they're considering suspension pending investigation. Heath nodded with satisfaction. And the children? Emma's at school, unaware. Justin's asking questions. He's smart enough to know something's happening. Keep them protected. None of this touches them directly. Heath ended the call and drove to the elementary school, where he'd attended parent-teacher conferences, watched Christmas plays, cheered at field days. The principal, Mrs. Clarissa Dixon, had known Heath for 10 years, had seen him juggle military duty with fatherhood, had witnessed his dedication to his children's education. Mr. Barnes, she said, embracing him warmly. Welcome home. I heard about this situation at home. How are you holding up? I'm managing. I wanted to discuss the children's stability during this difficult time. For the next hour, Heath painted a careful picture, a devoted father trying to protect his children from an increasingly unstable home environment. He provided documentation of Tanya's affair, Kurt's involvement with the children, the legal proceedings that could uproot Emma and Justin from their schools, their friends, their community. My greatest concern, Heath said, is that the children are being used as pawns in adult conflicts they don't understand. I want to ensure their best interests are protected. Mrs. Dixon nodded gravely. What are you requesting? Monitoring. Documentation. If anyone tries to remove my children from the school district, for any reason, I want to be notified immediately. That afternoon, Kurt Russell sat in his empty office, staring at foreclosure notices, investigation letters, and legal documents that would take months to resolve, if they could be resolved at all. His phone had stopped ringing because there was no one left to call. His lawyer was under investigation. His business partners were distancing themselves. His credit was destroyed. He thought about running, disappearing, starting over somewhere else. Then he thought about Heath Barnes' cold eyes and realized running wouldn't help. This wasn't random bad luck or coincidental investigations. This was targeted, systematic destruction by someone who understood exactly how to dismantle a life without leaving fingerprints. Kurt picked up his phone and dialed the only number that mattered. Tanya? We need to talk. Now. But when Tanya answered, her voice was hollow with defeat. It's over, Kurt. Everything's falling apart. He knows. He's known all along. Then we fight back. We hire better lawyers, With what money? My bank accounts are frozen pending investigation. You're broke. Bailey's practice is shut down. Tanya's laugh was bitter. He didn't just beat us. He erased us. Kurt stared out his office window at the city where he'd built his reputation, his wealth, his future. All of it gone because he'd underestimated a soldier's capacity for strategic warfare. What do we do now? Now. Tanya's voice was barely a whisper. Now we face the consequences. Chapter 8. The Price of Betrayal. Heath Barnes stood in the kitchen of his home, making coffee at 6 a.m. while reviewing the final phase of his campaign. Emma and Justin were still asleep upstairs, blissfully unaware that their mother had spent the previous night at a hotel because the house was now considered a potential crime scene, pending investigation into financial irregularities. The investigation was legitimate. Someone had reported concerns about assets being hidden during divorce proceedings, community property being misappropriated, and potential fraud involving joint accounts. All concerns that required official review, all triggered by anonymous tips backed by irrefutable documentation. Tanya's life was unraveling with the same methodical precision Heath had once applied to enemy targets. Her nursing license was under review for ethics violations. Her credit was destroyed by the financial investigation. Her reputation in the community, built over 15 years of marriage to a respected military veteran, was being systematically dismantled by her own documented choices. But Heath wasn't finished. His phone buzzed with a text from Douglas Schaefer. Package delivered. Heath smiled, remembering Kurt Russell's arrogance, his assumption that a deployed soldier posed no threat to his comfortable civilian life. Kurt was about to learn exactly how naive that assumption had been. Across town, Kurt Russell sat in his luxury condo, staring at legal documents that had been delivered at dawn. A civil lawsuit filed by 3 different clients, claiming he defrauded them on construction projects. Each lawsuit backed by evidence Kurt couldn't deny, because the evidence was real. Heath's team hadn't manufactured crimes. They'd simply ensured that Kurt's existing corners cutting, his casual disregard for building codes, his pattern of promising more than he delivered, all received simultaneous professional scrutiny. Kurt's phone rang. His insurance company. Mr. Russell, we're calling to inform you that your professional liability coverage is being canceled effective immediately. The number of claims filed against you exceeds our risk tolerance. You can't just cancel. Actually, sir, we can. It's in your contract. Section 14 covers situations involving criminal investigation or professional misconduct allegations. Kurt hung up and immediately dialed his accountant, only to discover that his business accounts had been frozen pending the fraud investigation. His assets were locked, his credit destroyed, his professional reputation in ruins. But the cruelest blow came in the afternoon, when his phone rang with a call from Emma Barnes. Kurt. Her voice was small, confused. My dad said you've been lying to us. About Mom, about the divorce, about why he had to go away. Is that true? Kurt closed his eyes, understanding that this was Heath's masterstroke, not just destroying Kurt's life, but ensuring his children understood exactly who was responsible for their family's destruction. Emma, sweetheart, it's complicated. Dad showed us pictures of you and Mom at restaurants holding hands. He said you were trying to steal us away from him. Emma's voice broke. He said you wanted to take us to California so he'd never see us again. That's not. We weren't trying to. Kurt struggled for words that might salvage something, anything. I care about you and Justin. I was just trying to help. By lying? By sneaking around? By making Mom lie to us about Dad? Kurt realized he had no answer that would make things worse. Heath had positioned this perfectly. Kurt wasn't just the man who'd broken up their family. He was the man who deceived them, manipulated them, used them as weapons against their own father. Emma, I'm sorry. I never meant for anyone to get hurt. But we did get hurt. Mom's crying all the time now. Dad looks angry and sad. And Justin won't even talk to you anymore. Emma's voice hardened with a maturity beyond her 15 years. Dad says people who betray families don't get second chances. The line went dead. That evening, Tanya sat across from Heath in a restaurant where they'd celebrated their 5th anniversary. The irony wasn't lost on either of them, returning to the scene of happier times to negotiate the terms of their divorce. You destroyed him, Tanya said, her voice hollow. No, Heath replied calmly. I exposed him. Kurt Russell destroyed himself through choices he made. I simply ensured those choices had appropriate consequences. His business is gone. His reputation is ruined. The police are investigating him for fraud. All legitimate investigations based on his actual conduct. I didn't fabricate evidence, Tanya. I just made sure existing evidence was properly reviewed. Tanya stared at her untouched coffee. And me? What did I do to deserve having my life dismantled? Heath leaned forward slightly. You filed for divorce while I was deployed. You claimed my service to this country constituted abandonment of our children. You introduced another man into their lives without my knowledge or consent. You planned to move them across the country to prevent me from maintaining a relationship with them. His voice remained steady, professional. What exactly did you think would happen? I thought you'd fight it in court like a normal person. Normal people don't have their families attacked while they're serving overseas. Heath's eyes were ice cold. You chose to go to war with someone who's exceptionally good at warfare. These are the results. Tanya looked up at him, seeing clearly for the first time the man she'd married. Not the absent husband that she'd convinced herself he'd become, but the strategic, unforgiving, utterly competent soldier who'd earned respect through strength and fear through necessity. What happens now? Heath slid a folder across the table. Divorce agreement. You sign it, this ends. You fight it, this continues. Tanya opened the folder, scanning terms that were harsh but not vindictive. She would receive the house, spousal support, and shared custody, but only if she remained in Colorado, agreed to all travel restrictions regarding the children, and submitted to regular evaluations to ensure their stability. And Kurt Russell is no longer your concern. As of today, if you have any contact with him, any contact at all, the agreement is void and the investigations continue. Heath's expression was granite. He played games with my family. Now he gets to live with the consequences for the rest of his life. Tanya stared at the papers, understanding that she was reading her surrender terms. You'll never forgive me, will you? No, Heath said simply. I don't forgive betrayal. I don't forget when someone tries to steal my children. And I don't give second chances to people who mistake my absence for weakness. Tanya signed the papers with shaking hands, officially ending 15 years of marriage and any hope of redemption. As they left the restaurant, Heath felt no satisfaction, no victory, only the cold completion of a necessary mission. He'd protected his children, secured his relationship with them, and ensured that those who betrayed him understood the permanent consequences of their choices. The war was over. Heath Barnes had won, but winning, he realized, felt nothing like he'd expected. Chapter 9. No Forgiveness. 6 months later, Heath Barnes sat in the bleachers watching Emma's soccer game, surrounded by other parents who treated him with the respectful distance reserved for local legends. The story of his return, the swift destruction of his wife's affair, and the methodical dismantling of Kurt Russell's life had become community folklore, a cautionary tale about the dangers of crossing certain lines. Emma scored the winning goal and looked directly at Heath in the stands, her smile radiant with the confidence of a child who knew her father would always be there when it mattered. Justin sat beside Heath, no longer the angry teenager who'd resented the deployment, but a young man who'd learned hard lessons about loyalty, consequences, and the price of betrayal. After the game, Emma ran to Heath with grass stains on her uniform and victory in her eyes. Did you see that goal, Dad? I saw it. Perfect form, excellent positioning. Heath hugged his daughter, marveling at how quickly children could recover from trauma when the adults in their lives provided stability and truth. Can we get ice cream? Please. Of course. Justin, you coming? His son nodded, but Heath noticed the way Justin's eyes scanned the parking lot, looking for threats, evaluating faces, unconsciously mimicking the hypervigilance Heath had taught him through example. The boy had learned that the world contained predators, but also that some people were worth following into battle. As they walked toward Heath's truck, a familiar voice called out behind them. Heath, can we talk? He turned to see Tanya approaching, wearing scrubs from her new job at a clinic across town, the only medical facility willing to hire her after the nursing board investigation. She looked older, worn down by months of consequences and social isolation. Mom! Emma started toward her, but Heath's gentle hand on her shoulder stopped her. Emma, Justin, get in the truck. I'll be right there. His children obeyed without question, understanding the dynamics that now govern their family. They loved their mother, but they respected their father's authority to manage interactions with people who'd proven untrustworthy. How are you holding up? Heath asked, his tone neutral but not unkind. Tanya wrapped her arms around herself, looking fragile in a way that once would have triggered Heath's protective instincts. I'm surviving. The job pays enough to cover my apartment, therapy bills. I'm managing. Good. The children need stability. About that, Tanya glanced toward the truck where Emma and Justin waited. Emma's birthday is next week. I was hoping we could celebrate together. As a family. Heath studied his ex-wife's face, seeing hope and desperation in equal measure. We're not a family anymore, Tanya. You made that choice. I know I made mistakes. Mistakes? Heath's voice carried a hint of the cold fury that had driven his campaign of destruction. You didn't make mistakes. You made calculated decisions to betray your marriage, manipulate your children, and destroy their relationship with their father. Those weren't mistakes, they were choices. Tanya's composure cracked. I know what I did was wrong, but we have children together. Doesn't that mean anything? It means you'll always be their mother. It means I'll always ensure they have access to you because they need that relationship. But it doesn't mean I forgive you, and it doesn't mean we rebuild what you destroyed. People change, Heath. I've learned. Have you? Heath's interruption was sharp. Because 3 weeks ago, you called Kurt Russell. Twice. Tanya's face went white. How did you? I told you that any contact with him would void our agreement. I meant it. Heath's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. You want to know why I'll never forgive you? Because even after everything that happened, even after seeing what your choices cost our children, you still reached out to the man who tried to steal them from me. It wasn't like that. He called me, crying, talking about losing everything. I felt sorry for him. You felt sorry for him. Heath's laugh was devoid of humor. The man who planned to move my children across the country, who helped you lie to them about their father, who tried to erase me from their lives. And you felt sorry for him. Tanya realized she'd made another catastrophic error in judgment. Heath, please. The agreement stands because the children need consistency. But you and I are done having conversations about second chances. You've proven you can't be trusted to maintain boundaries, to prioritize your children's well-being over your own emotions. Heath turned to walk away, then paused. Emma's birthday party is Saturday at 2. You can attend for 2 hours supervised. Justin's science fair is Thursday evening. You can come for 1 hour. Those are the limits of your involvement in family events. That's not enough. It's exactly what you earned. Heath faced her fully, his expression final. You want more access to your children? Prove over the next year that you can follow rules, maintain boundaries, and put their needs ahead of your own. But understand this. I will never trust you again. I will never forgive what you tried to do to my family. And if you ever put my children at risk again, the consequences will make the last 6 months look like a gentle warning. As Heath drove away with his children, Emma chattering about ice cream flavors, and Justin quietly processing the interaction he'd witnessed, he felt the settled calm of a mission completed successfully. Tanya Barnes stood alone in the parking lot, watching the taillights of the truck that carried the family she'd destroyed through her own choices. Around her, other parents gathered their children, loaded gear, made plans for family dinners and homework help, and all the ordinary moments that created extraordinary bonds. She'd traded all of that for 6 months with